Hi, my name is Towela Margaret Munthali. I'm a senior English major here at Tulane, and today I'm going to be talking about miscegenation in Gothic and modern horror through the lens of Helen Oyeyemi's debut novel, The Icarus Girl, which was published in 2005. So recently, in the film world, there has been an increase in artists creating horror films that speak specifically to the experience of marginalized communities, especially Black artists. But while cinema has recently been incorporating more compelling narratives, the literary world has fallen to the wayside for a variety of reasons. And so my independent study looks at how the traditions of the Gothic horror genre in general has informed this very specific text that I'm looking at, which is, again, The Icarus Girl. So, a brief synopsis of the novel. The Icarus Girl is about 10-year-old Jessamy, who is half Nigerian, half British, and she takes a trip from London to Nigeria where she develops this doppelganger who becomes more and more malicious until the end of the book, where the doppelganger has to be exorcised. And so, looking at the way that this novel functions, there's a lot that we can see that is inherited from the Gothic horror tradition. Much of modern horror actually originates in Gothic horror, which is from England in the 19th century, and an important aspect of this is the idea of othering. Of course, othering in that time and to this day is very much focused on like non-white subjects, so Black subjects and mixed subjects. It's been very important in terms of the constructions of race and racial hybridity, which has been very similar to the American ideals, which I'll talk about in just a second. However, we find that in a number of Gothic novels, there are antagonists that are coded as racial hybrids or racially ambiguous, to say the least. Our most famous example at this point might be Heathcliff from Wuthering Heights, who is described as a dark-skinned gypsy, and it's unclear whether or not Heathcliff is actually, the son of the original owner of Thrushcross Grange. But it's just one example of a long history of racial hybridity being marked as monstrous. And so when we're talking about racial hybridity, I mean, we're talking about miscegenation, which is the mixing of different races. So for a very long time, both in the UK and the USA, miscegenation was seen as this really shameful and disgraceful kind of practice, but was also very necessary. So it occupies this ambivalent space where it is, beneath a white, master to have intercourse with, their Black subjects. However, it's kind of necessary to keep their population of indentured labor thriving and continuing. As such, mixed people and racial hybrids become monstrous as they become the embodiment of abjection. And here when I'm talking about abjection, it's the idea of something that is toxic to a community. They pollute the community that they're in, and there's a significant fear of infection. And the abject is described as so because an abject subject can transcend the boundaries that structure a society. So clearly, when we have racial hybrids, they challenge the notions of race and the boundaries of that. And so with all of this context, we can see how the Icarus Girl is really drawing a lot from this centuries-old discourse. in this novel, we have a literal manifestation of monstrosity, which originates while Jess is in Nigeria. Um, a lot of scholars have looked at this novel as a very clear metaphor for double consciousness, where her subject becomes split through trauma. And it's the split between Jess's like blackness and also her identity as a mixed person and trying to consolidate the two. And however, although a number of scholars have actually found this to be a very interesting and nuanced take on the conversation of, where exactly biracial people fit, I actually found this narrative and novel to be incredibly anti-Black in the way that Oyeyemi uses the metaphors of the doppelganger, and it is very much sustaining the idea of the tragic mulatto. So it's more so because the doppelganger is this embodiment of abjection that must be exercised, and it's a manifestation of her Blackness. So that's what I mean by anti-Black. And so what my goal was rather, in this independent study was to take a look at this novel that, was very popular when it came out. She won a National Book Award in the UK, and dig a little bit more instead of looking at identity of the writer and saying, this is art that is created by a Black artist and taking it at face value. Rather, I wanted to deconstruct all of the different tropes and discourses that are happening in this novel and look at how much they have inherited that sense of anti-Blackness through colonial structures and powers, and to push conversations of race a little bit further in the space of literary genres, especially the horror literary genre. Thank you.